Okay, hello all. My name is Xiaoyu, and I'm a PhD student of the Department of Electronic Systems, Norwegian University of Science and Technology. Today, I'm going to present our work, self-supervised underwater source localization based on contrastive predictive coding. And my co-authors are Professor Hefeng, Pierluigi, and Martin, and they are also my supervisors. And today's presentation is for the conference IEEE Sensors 2021. Okay, firstly, let me show our acknowledgement. So the authors would like to acknowledge the Norwegian Research Council as the industry partner of the games project. And Xiaoyu would like to acknowledge the China Scholarship Council for the fellowship support. So here is our outline. So firstly, let me introduce some terminologies. Supervised learning is a method learns a function mapping an input to an output based on the label dataset. And according to the different type of labels, it could be classification or regression. And the self-supervised learning is a method learns the function extracting useful features to represent the unlabeled dataset. And two-step framework based on self-supervised learning. Firstly, the step one is to solve pretext task. And the pretext task is a task letting the model learn latent features based on self-supervised learning. And it has several types, such as reconstructing the input, predicting the future, or solving the jigsaw puzzle, and so on. And the data used to solve this task is the unlabeled data. And the second step is called downstream task. And the downstream task is the actual task needs to be solved based on supervised learning. And that is underwater source localization in this paper. And the data used to solve downstream tasks is all the label data. And then let's move on to the background and the motivations. So recently, there are several studies on underwater source localization based on supervised learning. However, there is a huge limitation of supervised learning. That is, the labels are always needed. However, in many real scenarios, a whole dataset will only consist of a small portion of labeled data and a large portion of unlabeled data. So this limitation inspired our motivations, that is, how to sufficiently utilize the dataset we have. Well, the approach is to combine the self-supervised learning and supervised learning. And secondly, we would like to introduce new self-supervised learning methods into the field. Since self-supervised learning methods have been widely applied in computer vision, natural language processing, and speech recognition, and we guess this method may have huge potential for our field. And then let's move on to the database and preprocessing. So firstly, the database is a well-known common database in underwater acoustics called the SWellEx-96 Event S5. And in this event, two sources were told simultaneously by a vessel and transmitting multi-tone signals. And in this paper, the sources and vessel are treated together as a source since they were moving simultaneously. And data collected by a vertical linear array, so-called VLA, are used. The VLA recorded the full 75-minute data with a sampling rate of 1500 Hertz. And there were 21 sensors vertically spacing from depths about 100 to 200 meters. And then let's talk about the preprocessing. So firstly, how to construct the dataset. So to construct signals matrix X, we cut the collected raw data, that is the collected acoustic signal, into 1125 slices, that is 4 seconds per slice, without overlap. And we arrange them together into a matrix of size 1125 by 6000. And this 6000 is the length of that 4-second time series. And also the horizontal distance between the source and VLA is provided by the database. So correspondingly, we can construct the label vector Y of size 1125 by 1. And then let's talk about the method for preprocessing. The preprocessing is for keeping the stability of training the neural net. So we applied standardization on signal matrix X and minimax scaling, that is scaling the number into interval 0 to 1 on label vector Y. And finally, scheme for building the training dataset, to mimic saturation of extremely limited label data. So only 12.5% of the signals and the corresponding source location were chosen together to build the training dataset. That is about 140 samples for the downstream task. And also to examine the influence of depths, number 1, 10, and 21 relate to the top, middle, and bottom receivers were chosen respectively. So at the last, here is the visualization of the dataset. So in the left-hand side figure, this is the visualization of the signal matrix X, and the x-axis is the index of slices, and the y-axis is just the slice, each slice. And the right-hand side is the source location during the whole event S5, shown in the red dot. And this small black dot is related to the data point used for training dataset for the downstream task. Yes. And then let's move on to the first step, pretext task, that is predicting the future. So here we introduce the method called contrastive predictive coding, so-called CPC-based model. The architecture is shown in the left-hand side figure. And basically, here is saying this is the 4-second time series, and it was fed into an encoder, and the encoder will compress the original signal into a latent space with different latent time step. And the time step until a specific time t will be fed into an RNN, and the RNN will get a context representation for the latent space. And then we use this context representation to predict the future in the latent space. So the goal of CPC is to predict the future k time steps by modeling a density ratio, which preserves the mutual information. And the encoder and RNN are trained jointly to optimize the loss function based on noise contrastive estimation for maximizing the mutual information. And then now let's move on to the second step, downstream task, that is, of course, source localization. And the figure shows the architecture of the model used for source localization. So it has two parts. The first one is pre-trained encoder. So the parameter of this encoder has been frozen after the first step of pretext task. And then it is connected with a 3-layer MLP. And during the training for the downstream task, each column, that is each slice, that is actually just the 4-second time series, was fed into the encoder, and the encoder will get a feature vector, and the feature vector is fed into this 3-layer MLP for the final source localization task. And because of the source localization task is a regression problem, so we chose MSE, mean squared error, as the loss function. And now let's move on to the performance analysis. So 3 candidate models, CPC-based model, and the autoencoder-based model, and the purely supervised model are tested on the data collected by all receivers and trained separately based on the data collected by receiver number 1, 10, and 21 to examine the influence of depths. And as shown in the figure, so the matrix is the y-axis, and it's MSE, mean squared error. So which means the shorter the bar, the better the performance. And as for legend, the blue, orange, and the gray bars are related to the CPC-based, autoencoder-based, and the purely supervised models. And we can see that the CPC-based model shows the best performance. And also there is a slight difference in performance among different receiver depths. And then let's move on to the importance of slow features. So as shown in the figure, these two figures are the result of source localization and based on CPC and AE model. And in the plot of AE, there is a wide ambiguity interval shown in this black box of prediction from about 3 to 7 kilometers during the first 40 minutes. In the plot of CPC, however, there is no such ambiguity interval. And this time period relates to the far field condition, which means that the high frequency shift noise cannot provide enough information, and the source related information is more important during the far field condition. And based on the spectrum analysis, the frequency of the source is lower than that of shift noise. And the lower frequency component corresponds to the slower changing feature in the time domain. So the CPC-based model can extract better features, that is, the slow features for the downstream task. Okay, then let's move on to the final part, conclusion and future work. So the contribution of our work are, firstly, this work investigates the application of contrastive predictive coding for underwater source localization based on self-supervised learning. And secondly, signals in time domain are directly used for underwater source localization. And also, according to the performance analysis, the CPC-based model shows the best performance. And as for the future work, well, based on this conference paper, we expand the experiments, and we kind of write a new paper named the time frequency fused underwater source localization method based on contrastive predictive coding. That will be coming soon. Okay, thanks for your attention. And here is my email, and feel free to ask me if you have any question. Thank you.